Hey, footy fans, welcome to the Point of Difference Rugby League podcast. I'm your host, Dave, and today I have a superstar guest on the show. We all know who he is. He's a Canberra Raiders legend, New South Wales and Kangaroo great. It's the one and only Bradley Clyde. How are you, man?
I'm really well after that introduction. That was very, very kind of you.
Oh, mate, you absolutely deserve it. One of the great players. Probably, I would say a lot of people would say that you're one of the players who changed the way second rowers played the game, the way you played it. And, there's a lot of people on my Facebook page, particularly looking forward to this podcast. Ben Leah, he played for Widnes and he's a Kiwi lad over here. His favourite player, Bradley Clyde. So shout out to you, Ben. This is awesome.
That's really nice to hear that. Yeah, and whenever I hear that, you don't realise the impact that you had back in the day.
Absolutely, man. So I've just come back from Australia, sunny Gold Coast. I've been sunning myself for 2 weeks. Come back to rain and misery here at Christchurch today. And so whereabouts are you, man, in Australia? Is it nice where you're living these days?
Yeah, I'm in Sydney these days. I live in North Sydney and still living the dream. The fact that the rugby league's still giving for me, I probably don't talk it as much these days. I work in the corporate world of executive search, but it is a way of being able to connect people. Sport in generally does cross all boundaries, and I'm still living off what I did 20 years ago.
Mate, it's definitely that. I moved to Christchurch. Yeah, it was like a year and a half or so ago, and moving to Christchurch and meeting all the rugby league community down here has been unreal. I didn't know a single person down here, and now I've got friends everywhere. So I'm absolutely loving the sport for that particular reason. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've entered into the corporate world from sport, and but they're exactly the same. Everyone wants to win. You've got to win. There needs to be some sort of competitive advantage against your competitors,
Yeah.
and some of that requires having good people. And so I'm in executive recruitment, so I'm talking to leaders about how they get to win and beat
Perfect.
their opposition.
Right. Awesome. Right. So
Mm.
that's good to hear what you're up to, man. So let's rewind the clock, go back to the very beginning. Young Bradley Clyde, where'd you grow up? And what was life like for you as a young fella before you got into league?
I had a great childhood in Canberra. I pretty much I started off in a town called Holbrook, which is
Okay.
down near Albury, and very much AFL and rugby league. My dad was a shearer,
Right.
and travelled the east coast pretty much back in the day with shearing during shearing season, and he played AFL and rugby league, and was a shearer during the week. So a very physical life for him. So as a consequence, I lived a similar life when I was going through school. I played AFL and rugby league at the same time from the ages sort of 4, 5, and 6, and
Okay.
right through until I was about 14 or 15. It was where mum just got sick of running me to training all the time, and she said, "You got to pick one or the other." And at the time, it was a really tough decision because I loved both, and it wasn't just those two sports that I loved. I had a crack at pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I am a sports tragic, but at the same time, the Raiders had come into the competition in 1982 in
Okay.
Canberra, and that's where we were living at the time. And I found that just having that pathway, it was tangible for
Right.
me to play at the very top level without even leaving home. And so I made that decision,
Yeah.
and and sort of haven't looked back. I often think to myself what it would have been like playing AFL, but I'm glad I stuck with rugby league and lived the magic carpet ride.
Yeah, you and me both, mate. It would have been a tragedy to not have you in rugby league. Absolute tragedy. So, what was it about the game though that kept you coming back as a young fella? Like was it the physicality, scoring tries, cutting guys in half? What was it?
It was all that. It was the firstly that team element. I really enjoyed trying to get people of different backgrounds and skill sets and their priorities
Yeah.
at that level are very different. Some at a young age, there's young boys are sort of chasing butterflies while they're on the field, and some people don't like the physicalness of rugby league as much. Where you've got others at another level, and so it does teach you some diversity around people and
Yes.
bringing people together to and be motivated to win football games. But so yeah, I really I enjoyed at around that age of 15. I was I signed my first contract with the Raiders at 15, but it wasn't until then, just before I signed, I made the Australian schoolboys in that year, and it was at that time that I thought, hang on, I might be able to make a career out of this.
Right.
At the time, of course, rugby league was semi-professional; it wasn't fully professional.
Yeah.
But it was something that I really invested in at that point, and I started. I was pretty scrawny, and I needed to become more of a threat when I carried the ball.
Yeah.
So I started lifting weights, and I started getting a little bit more serious about my training at about that point. So
Right.
yeah, it was about 15 that I decided, well, maybe I can make a go of this.
Yeah, because you touched on it. You went on the Australian Schoolboys tour of Great Britain, didn't you? 1986, was that like the thing that leapfrogged you to the next level?
It was. It gives you a flavour and a bit of a benchmark about where you are
Yeah.
with other people that are in a similar age.
Yeah.
And that tour itself was a real. I'd grown up watching the Invincibles,
Oh, wow.
82 and 86, the
Yeah.
Australian teams over in England, being on tour, and the on-field stories as well as the off-field stories were magical. And
Okay.
so for me as a 16-year-old to be able to go over there and live that dream was very cool. And we were successful right through that tour, and I think just through fear of being that first Australian team to lose, it was a big motivator to make sure that you won every game.
Absolutely, man. Who were some of the players you remember that toured with you that like most people might recognize these days?
Yes, yeah. Oh, well, there was Mark Soden
Oh,
he
yes.
was the captain
Okay.
and a really good leader. He obviously played there at Norse, and
Yes.
there was Grant Butterfield, the brother of Anthony. Scott Wilson was on top of his game during, as a younger player. He
Yeah.
was fantastic at that point. Glenn Lydiard
Oh,
was
wow.
in that side. There was Michael Erickson from Parramatta,
Okay.
and Rod Collins, also from Parramatta. Yeah, so it was a really, really good side. There was a young player by the name of Roger Roberts
Okay.
from Ballina, and he was a super young player. Played a few games for Balmain, but we never saw the best of him, I'm afraid.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So coming back from that tour, and that was when the Raiders picked you up, is that correct? And like how massive was that for you thinking, okay, I do have an opportunity to stay in Canberra. I've gone on this tour. Now the Raiders have picked me up. Just how big is that for a young Bradley Clyde? You're thinking, oh, geez, I've got this.
Yeah, well, it was, and I'd signed before I went on that tour, and I was and then Wayne Bennett comes along to the
Yeah.
Raiders. And as a young person, after I come back from that tour, he invited me to come and train with the Raiders as a 17-year-old.
Okay.
Although he said he didn't want me to start playing grade until I was ready, he did want me to start training with them.
Right.
So these are the players I was getting their footy cards signed only 12 months before,
Exactly.
I was jumping the fence trying to with a pen and footy card so I could get their signatures. But so I jumped at that opportunity every Tuesday. I trained
Yep.
with the team from
Amazing.
as a 17-year-old, and so I learned, an enormous amount. But what I did learn during that period is Wayne Bennett was a master coach, but he did focus a lot on the fundamentals
Yep.
of skill development. And
Okay.
it's a good platform for any team or coach to be able to go, well, no, let's go back to basics. This is,
Yeah.
we really need to get this part of our game right before we can elevate to developing the skills at a higher level. Because
Okay.
often games can be won and lost by sometimes the players dropping the ball as they get up and just play the ball, or they don't play the ball properly, or they don't pass the ball properly, or
Yeah.
it's these common things where if you don't get them right, and
Yep.
they are so fundamental that it can be the difference between winning and losing. He knew that. So those little 1% items where he focused. So that stays with me from those Wayne Bennett days. Here I was 17.
Yeah.
He what were some of the other things that he flagged to me? No excuses was a piece that always stayed with me for
Okay.
a long time. And he said, you're setting yourself short and long term goals, whatever they may be. Don't let anything get in the way. If they really mean something to you,
Yeah.
there's no interference. And
Let's go get it.
I really bought into that.
Yep.
I didn't want to be one of those players at the end of my career wondering, I should have done this or I should have done that, or a disappointment.
Okay.
I did want to be one of those players that absolutely gave it all,
Yep.
so I completely invested in what Wayne Bennett was trying to achieve, and so consequently learned a lot while he was in Canberra. It was only for 12 months, I think, but I benefited enormously. And then the year after, I started with the Raiders.
Yes, you did. And just as a young fella, what is it like for the first time when you rock up to training, like 17, 18 years old, and there's Glenn Lazarus and Laurie Daly and Sam Backo and Stevie
Yeah.
Walters, and like, what's that like for a young fella?
Yeah, I remember walking into the dressing rooms for the first time, and there was there was Mal Meninga
Oh, big
in the
mouth, of
sheds.
course.
Peter Jackson was enormously influential during that period, and I continue to talk about him because I loved his input into the Raiders and the development of the Raiders.
Yep.
Dean Lance was a wonderful influence. Ashley Gilbert, some of these Chris O'Sullivan, more local
Oh, yes.
players that
He wore
come
the
through.
headgear,
It was Craig Bellamy.
Yep.
He was one of the inaugural Raiders players.
Yeah.
All these players that had such an influence on me, but developing the culture at the club. Mel and Gary Belcher and Peter Jackson in particular
Yeah.
had just set expectations around performance, and it wasn't just on the field, off the field as well.
Okay.
And the culture that they were driving was, if team was first, team was
Okay.
above God, team was above family, team
Right.
was above, and this is, and I invested in it. Laurie invested in it. Ricky and Lazo, we're all young guys coming through, and we had to learn how to win. Otherwise, if we may not have been as successful as what the Raiders were, and
Yep.
so I do put it down to that critical learning period, first coming into grade, and really acknowledging and understanding the behaviours of how to win football games.
Right. And were you shy like when you first rocked up, or were you quite confident and got in with the boys like straight away? Or did they make you earn your stripes, or was there any initiations for you?
Yeah, not so much initiation, although looking back, you probably were expected to do a lot of different things. But uh, yeah, the Raiders they were very accepting, and
Okay.
the older players knew their responsibility to be able to shape up us in a way that was conducive to winning footy games.
Right. Okay. So you got to play in 1988. You had a really good season, obviously. You guys made it to the minor semi-final. So what's it like stepping up to playing, finals footy in your first season, and also picking up the Raiders Rookie of the Year award?
Yeah, it was all pretty cool, and it was the start of that magic carpet ride for me. But to be fair, it was considered a disappointing year because the year before they made the grand final but lost.
Yep.
So I was looking around the dressing rooms, and we had a wonderful side, and because Kevy Walters was there as well as Peter Jackson, Sam Bacco was at the Raiders at that point. It was a magical side, but we felt as though we could have and should have won. The Bulldogs and the Tigers had really strong teams during that time as well, and it was always a tough game. Unfortunately, we ended up on the losing side. So for us, I guess it was an opportunity missed, and we wanted to make up for that.
Well, you certainly did. Moving into 1989, before we get to the grand final, we've got to talk about your major state of origin debut. Unfortunately, you didn't win the series, but what's it like? You're still only a young fella. You're running out in front of 33,000 screaming Queenslanders. And, you've got to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the old Lang Park, and I knew I'd arrived at Lang Park when I got a 4X can hit me in my leg as I'm standing on the field waiting for the kickoff. I was standing right near the old pig pen. And any of those people that have been to Lang Park at a state of origin back in the day, the pig pen was some interesting characters there. It was a tough night. I remember my first game, myself and Laurie, it was our first games, and we that learning curve was vertical that night. It really was. They had a gun team, and so we had to regather for that second game, and the third. Unfortunately, we didn't win any of those games, but it was the start of something. It was. I'm glad that Jack kept both the majority of that team, and from 1990 things looked different.
Yeah, man. And so, what's it like going into battle against your teammates at the Raiders? You got Gary Coyne, Big Mel, Gary Belcher, but then you had Laurie Daly and Glenn Lazarus on your side. Is there a bit of club rivalry going on there after the match?
Oh, there sure is, and it's bragging rights when you get back to training, right?
Yeah.
So it's massive, and so right through that whole period, we're playing against these guys, and it meant a great deal if you won, because the bragging rights, and but at the same time, that peer assessment or peer review, you wanted your mates to really understand how good a player you are. So you're really sort of trying to probably play harder than what you normally do, or tackle your teammates harder than anyone else, because you're really looking for them to sort of understand, well, he can play, this guy.
Yeah, don't mess with him. No, don't run at him. So just how intense, like you said, it was a steep learning curve. Like, is it really steep, like in terms of the intensity compared to New South Wales Rugby League competition at the time?
Yeah, so I looked at it and probably it's more physical than anything else. The speed, probably a touch faster, but
Okay.
it's the actual contact. It's the physicalness when you come together because
Yeah.
you've got it's like for like. It's it's some of the best players in the world you're up against, and so it's a challenge. And you've really got to come out of it. And with your head held high, or else it's back to the drawing board. You've really, although you always have that continual improvement,
Yes.
to know that you've come off and one, you've won, but two, you as an individual, you feel as though did I play better than my opposition? Did my opposition number?
Yes.
Did I? What was my real contribution to the game?
Okay.
And I always had a goal of trying to do something special at least twice every half.
Okay.
And so it wasn't just trying to uh, add another stat to your numbers. It was more being able to add quality stats
Right.
and being because sometimes that quality can shift momentum, can shift games, and that momentum can be the difference sometimes.
Well, you said that earlier about what Wayne Bennett taught with those loose passes at the end of a game. Like I remember the series where Darren Lockyer swooped on that Brett Hodgson pass, and that changed the history of Queensland's dynasty.
Yeah,
Like if that
that's
one
right.
pass changed history for sure. Like so,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. No, and sometimes it's it like you say, it can be years. It can set up a real culture through those errors. No doubt that game didn't just come down to that. It was a number of other areas that need improvement.
yeah,
Mm.
for sure. Um, so you did have your first series win for New South Wales in 1990, winning the first two games. So what are your memories of the siren going off? You know, the feeling of ecstasy. Is that everything that Origin is about? That feeling of winning the series?
Yeah, it really was. It was. I felt as though we were a part of something.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a. I guess it was the fact that I looked around the dressing room and I thought there were some really special players,
yeah,
and that they were all a similar age. We're all relatively young, and there was some older players there that, of course, in any perfect mix of a team, you're
yeah,
looking for some older players and younger players. Um, the the the, um, the leaders of the group, and then you've got the followers. But and if they're all on top of their game, there's no reason why you should lose. I thought that mix that we had during that period was spot on. I thought the preparation, in particular from Phil Gould,
yeah,
was enormous. I I look back and I do think that he would have been too intense for me as a club coach.
yep,
But for a 12, 13 week campaign with the state of origin,
yeah.
I tell you, he was fantastic. I learned an enormous amount through Phil, but yeah, super intense. And because of that, I think that was a competitive advantage that we had during that time, I think.
Yeah, well, you went on and won another two series, 92 and 94. And then you also played in that 1997 Tri-Series State of Origin, whatever you want to call it, in the Super League
Yeah.
season. And you guys went to like extra time. A bit of a Noel Goldthorpe field goal to finally break the deadlock. Like, mate, what's it like playing? Like, you must have been exhausted in that match.
I was so glad to see the field goal go over, but then the siren just to sound because you was just so tired.
Oh, mate, I would have been knackered. Oh,
Yeah. It was a tough game,
yeah.
but yeah, the game was at an interesting stage, and look, I Super League was, I look back and hope that we never go through that, only because the game was fractured for
Oh,
far
yeah.
too long. So I'm sure situations like that need to be managed in the boardroom and not impact at game level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think better management and discussion at that strategic level rather than impacting the game at that grass level
Yeah.
in hindsight.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about Super League later, but while we're talking about it, like, what was your personal journey through it? Because you were like getting hunted down by Eastern Suburbs to sign with them, from what I read, and but you turned them down and stuck with the Raiders. So, what was your personal journey through that whole mess that was Super League?
Yeah, so uh, I was really happy at the Raiders.
Yeah,
We were winning football games. I really, I was still at home. Canberra was my home.
yeah,
I was still pretty much living with mum and dad and
sweet.
living the dream. It was, but so essentially, I just wanted to continue playing footy with my mates,
Yeah,
and it was pretty simple. I throughout my whole career, I was sort of courted to go and play elsewhere,
okay,
and the Roosters was an interesting one where it was just around Super League where some stupid numbers were being thrown around,
yeah.
but I remember going to see Kerry Packer.
Oh, yes.
James picked me up at the airport and took me into the ACP offices on Hyde Park, and Kerry's sitting there. As I walked in, it was um, he called me Clyde. Hello, Clyde. I think it's because he had a brother called Clyde,
Right.
Clyde Packer. Yeah, so I think he thought my first name was Clyde. And hello, Clyde. And he was pumping a cigarette into
Of
him.
course.
Yeah, he just it was a quadruple heart bypass only about 3 weeks before, but
Oh my God.
yeah, having a cigarette and we got chatting, and he ultimately said to me, "With or without you, Clyde, the Roosters will win the grand final
Wow.
in another 2 years."
Okay.
And I thought, that's interesting, and he's obviously has a lot of influence. But I never wavered from the fact that all I wanted to do was keep things pretty simple, and from what I was doing, I was still living the dream, and
Yeah,
from my own backyard. So I
absolutely.
just wanted to play footy in Canberra, and
Okay.
and so that's what I did ultimately. But that was probably the first time I was really challenged about leaving Canberra.
Okay. Yeah, that
Mm,
must have been a bit of pressure though, because there was massive contracts being thrown around, and they were really waiting for a big diamond to fall, like a big domino to fall, like yourself, or especially they were waiting for the Broncos to sign. They were trying to get Newcastle, and
mm,
it's unbelievable how it all shook out. But
yes.
thank God the game came back together. 98, and yeah,
Yes, very much. It is. People still talk about that period and the disappointment around that, and I agree.
yeah,
It was fractured, and but as you say, that it came back together with some pros and cons, and
yeah,
I think it was the game was fully professional when it came back together, which was
yes,
certainly a plus. And the division of TV rights going to the players was fundamental as well. So, the players then were getting a bigger portion of the profit of the game,
right,
essentially because they're the entertainment
yeah,
and always have been, but the profit remained with the TV stations.
right,
So yeah, so in all, it's a bigger pie now,
yeah.
a bigger proportion of that pays for the salary cap and the players.
Would you say like it didn't? fully heal straight away because then you lost a few of those clubs that were so important to the game, in my opinion.
Mm.
Like we lost Souths for a couple of seasons, and a
Yeah.
lot of Steelers are gone, and they're still there, but they're called the Dragons. Just it
Mm.
hurt a lot of clubs, Tigers and Magpies, and all of that.
I definitely, yeah, Newtown North Foundation clubs.
Yeah,
These guys,
exactly.
these
Yeah,
are,
Norths is a big
and
one.
it must tear up those supporters that have still got those jerseys in there, and grew up at Henson Park or North Sydney Oval,
Yeah,
um, and no longer have that, are able to live that heritage. Um, it'd be nice for the Bears to come back, maybe reinvented as a Perth entity, but I think I guess the evolution, there probably was too many teams in Sydney,
okay.
um, but yeah, it would have been a tough decision to make to eliminate those clubs.
Absolutely, man. I was pretty heartbroken for Souths because I'm a Kiwi, but there's just something about the Rabbitohs. There was a bit of an underdog. They'd been unsuccessful for quite a while, and I
Mm.
quite liked like Timmy Brasher was one of my favourite players, and he'd just started playing for them for a couple of years, and then they were gone. I was like, it's a shame to see them go, but glad to see them back. And
Yes.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, well, they've got one of the biggest supporter bases, been one of the most successful clubs of all time, albeit not in recent history. The last team to won it was a Michael Maguire coached team.
yeah.
Um, what was that,
2014.
2014,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, there's so much tradition attached to that South club is insane.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. So let's talk about 1989. This is one of the great grand finals of all time. We all know it. The sublime moment. 40,000 people packed in Sydney Football Stadium. Balmain Tigers get a couple of early tries in the first half. Was it James Grant went over early off a toddy loose
Yeah,
ball? Yeah,
that's right.
first
Yeah.
half. Yep, and
Yeah, yeah. So Toddy hadn't passed the ball in his whole entire career, and he decided to do it in his own 22 in a grand final.
yep, I'm going to give him a shout about this too. Approve the thought, so we're good.
Uh, but
Great.
I, but yeah, well, there was a great game, and fate had a lot to do with that day. I guess I'm a believer of fate, and
Right.
some of the things that happened during that game, it was pretty magical for the Raiders to. That was
Absolutely.
our first grand final win, and you wonder with those sliding door moments if we had a lost,
Yeah.
what would have happened to the club. But it was the start of something big.
Absolutely. What and like when I watch the highlight reels, I mean, I've watched the highlights a lot, and that Paul Sirenen try was freakish. Like one bad bounce of the ball for you guys, and then one of the great tries, to Siro, and you guys are down 12-2 going into half time. Like, what's the feelings like, and what's the half time chat before the second half?
Yeah, so you always knew that 10 points in a grand final is like climbing Everest,
Right.
but we the chatter was all positive.
Okay.
We felt as though that they'd scored points fortuitously.
Okay.
We although we none of us sort of thought we were the better team, we thought that we were really in this game,
Right.
and it was up to us to go out and to change it.
Okay.
So the chatter was positive, and it was led from Tim Sheens and Big Mal, but Sticky, Laurie, Dean Lance, these
Yep.
guys were uh, leaders in their own right, and they all stood up that afternoon.
They did indeed. And what about before we talk about the second half? What about the pre-match build-up? Like, what was the sort of game plan going into nullify that ridiculous Balmain pack? Like, it was stacked.
Yeah, well, we were to win the grand final, we had to win 10 games straight. You
Wow.
know, so we were under pressure week in and week out, which sort
Absolutely.
of conditioned us
Okay.
to be playing sudden death footy every week.
Right.
So we got on a bit of a roll. There was some momentum. There was some belief, and even in the modern game today, momentum is such a key element of any game. But that was sort of 2 months of us being on a roll,
Yeah.
and it's hard to stop. I've seen teams do it previously. A post. The Tigers in 2005, I think it
Yeah.
was.
They got
Had a
on the
team
roll.
of no ones, but Benji Marshall was a part of that team. Just got on a roll.
Yeah.
The Bulldogs in
95.
in '95.
Yeah.
That's right. They beat us. We had a great side. I was confident of winning the grand final. We had two injuries. I think we lost 2 games all year, and no injuries to key players, and they would come up. I think they finished 5th or 6th
Yeah,
and
they
got
were
on a
well down
roll.
the ladder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. Crazy.
So momentum's still a big part of our game, and so in '89 it really helped us believe in ourselves with that sudden death type approach.
Right.
2 months out, yes.
So well, that definitely carried you in that second half because Gary Boucher scored, got you guys going, and then the match is really poised on an knife edge, and then that magical moment, Chicka Ferguson, I keep watching the highlights. I think he should have gone left, but then he steps back against the grain and just somehow gets past all those guys, gets the ball down. There's Kevy Walters jumping up and down like a maniac, happy as. And what's
Yeah.
the emotions? Where were you on the field? What was it like for you being out?
Oh, I remember thinking it's exactly what needed to happen, but Chicka, it certainly wasn't the first time he's done that in a game to either win or because he would go in, run it through a mountain of enormous men, keep those little legs pumping, and come out the other side. Really freakish the way he used to do that, and so effective in that last game of '89, and got us to even points after Mal kicks it, and that was no given as well.
No, not the old toe hacker days. Oh, it's great stuff. So you go into extra time, and it was O'Sullivan kicks a field goal. How long into extra time was that? And how did you feel comfortable wise with only 1 point ahead? Because it wasn't golden point back then.
No, there was no golden point. I think it was 5 minutes each way,
right?
Back in the day, and you had to play those 5 minutes.
Yep.
So yeah, I think Gary Jack may have knocked the ball on or something, and we had the feed, and Chris O'Sullivan said to Laurie, unbeknownst to me, I'm just putting my head into the scrum, but so was everyone else. But I'm going to drop a field goal.
Yeah.
And then he yells out to Mal, Mal, I'm going to drop a field goal here. And Mal goes, no, you're not. Here it is on tackle 1. And Mal thought we could score a try. Here we are inside the half of our opposition. Let's have 6 tackles at him. Anyway, Mal wanted to kibosh it. Anyways, Sully goes, no, stuff you, and drops the field goal. Thank God he did.
He nailed it.
The old toe poker, wasn't it? There was no real round the corner approach. It was just straight up and down.
Yeah, those are the good old days. So you're going in, you've got the 1 point lead, and then the magical moment, Jackson, he gets the ball, was it 20 or 15 meters out, and nothing's really doing, and he just sort of kept going and steamrolling blokes and lands on the try line, and history's made. Mate.
Yeah.
What did you see?
When we crossed sides after 80 minutes, I felt we spoke about momentum. I felt that I felt really recharged and ready to go.
Okay.
And I felt that momentum was with us. And there was nothing that happened during that extra time that suggested otherwise. they were tight, and I felt that we we were the better team. Then Jacko proved it. He
Yeah.
bounced off players
Yes.
that would normally make those tackles but didn't because they were tired,
Yeah.
and that's what happens in with fatigue.
Yeah.
And he, his life changed immediately,
I bet it
uh,
is.
and
Good for you,
so
mate.
did ours. It was a magical moment. I go. I do think that that was one of my most favourite moments of all time.
I bet it was, mate. I was only a young fella when I watched all the highlights because I was born in '84, so I'm 40 this year. But during my 10, 11, 12 sort of years, I was always buying the videos or borrowing them, the Linfield Cup highlights. And mate, when I saw that one, oh wow, it's just the drama of it, it's
Yeah,
just crazy. And that's what rugby
and
league's
that's
all about.
you're so spot on. It captured the essence of footy,
Yeah,
and it is the theatre, the
yeah,
drama, the coming down to do or die, and this one player cuts the ball
yeah,
over. Although we were at one point in front, he sealed it,
yeah.
and you know the. And history says that the Raiders were the premiers from that point on.
Absolutely. And also the commentary back then was amazing. Like when you listen to the commentary of those 80s
Yeah,
and 90s day, like Graham Hughes and whatever, like sensational commentary. Like it
yeah.
really added to the theatre of it. I love it. I love it.
Oh, you're exactly right. I do love the fact that you watch those old tapes, and no matter who's commentating,
Yeah.
is all really animated. And
Yeah, man.
even
That's
the
it.
ABC back then, some of those commentators, absolute gold. But yeah, you're right. Graham Hughes was just on top of his game at that point.
Just the greatest, isn't he? He's so good. I love Rabs as well. Gotta love Rabs.
Yes, I agree.
Right. Right. Where are we? Right. You got the Clive Churchill medal as well out of that game. So player of the match goes to Bradley Clyde. I mean, that's like icing on the cake, isn't it?
Yeah, here I was. I'd played most of the year in '88 as my rookie year, and then '89. I'd lived the absolute dream,
Yeah.
and to cap off with a Clive Churchill medal was something really special. And so, yeah, massive year for me, and to be playing against as well as playing with so many absolute champions. It was really special. But then to be awarded the best player on the field, I thought, wow, this can't get any better.
Doesn't get much better, eh? That's pretty
Mm.
special, eh? That's so good.
Yes.
And then you guys went over to Widnes to play Widnes over at Old Trafford, the World Club Challenge. Unfortunately, it didn't go your way. But my old mate Kurt Sorensen and his boys, they were down 12-0, I believe, and you guys got run down. What was that experience like, though, playing in front of something like, I don't know, 70,000 people or something at Old Trafford
Yeah,
with Martin O'Fire and, my mate Kurt and, oh, mate, what a team. John Devereaux, I think, was he playing in that game?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, they had a fantastic side. And look, uh, we got out of the gates early, and probably didn't pay the game enough respect,
Okay.
um, and and including our opposition. I think, thinking back, but they were a fantastic side. So they deserve to win, and I don't know whether we won any of those club championship,
No.
club challenge games, because it was yeah, it was something that evaded us, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting how many times the UK clubs actually win those, and the NRL clubs hardly ever win them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. But yeah, it's just the anomaly of regrouping, I guess,
I guess.
after the climax of winning a grand final, and getting back in the saddle after celebrations as well, and playing one last game for that season. It is a mental and physical challenge.
I bet it is, especially if you've had a bit of a break out of the normal routine and
Mm.
2 weeks worth of drinking probably after a grand final.
Yeah, no, you're spot on.
Nailed
Day and night.
it. So 1990, another huge year for the Raiders. Winning the minor premiership and went back to back. But unfortunately for you, it was a bit of a bittersweet season. Did you do your ACL in 1990 at about, well, I don't know, around 20 or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I look, and looking back as an older person, you understand that this is what rugby league is,
Yeah.
and does. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's meant to challenge you, but here I am, 20. I was living the dream
Yeah, man.
and thought that this is how rugby league career was,
Yeah.
until this kicks you in the teeth. And I was on the sideline for far too long, the rest of that season and a bit of the next. And
Yeah.
I had to take my medicine and do everything I could to get back and be um, even better than what I was, previously. That was a goal that I had because, everyone's improving.
Yeah.
I need to be better. So I was so disappointed that I didn't, one, be a part of the Canberra assault to win the premiership, but two, then miss out on the Kangaroo tour.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it was bad news all around. But I had to take my medicine. I had what I took out of that whole process and consequent injuries as a player. You soon learn that, one, it's a part of the game
Yes.
because it is so physical.
Yeah.
But two, these things, they're meant to test us,
Yeah.
and they test your character.
Okay.
And it tests um, your desire to be a rugby league player. You know,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
I bet it does. It must be a pretty dark place though when your mates are hoisting the premiership trophy and you're doing rehab. You're obviously there at the game, but it has to be a dark place for any player.
Yeah, and it sure is. It is. And I think uh, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
That's a part of this challenge, of those demons that often come into your head. You've got to be able to manage it and process it, and you mightn't have all the answers there and then, but continually work through it and talk to people,
Yeah.
and you end up getting through it.
Yeah, man. Well, you certainly did that. You came back next year at about around 7 or 8 off the top of my head. And the Raiders had a really decent season. You obviously went all the way to the grand final again. But the Penrith Panthers had sort of cemented themselves as the force in the game that year. Brilliant side. Your Brad Fittlers, Greg Alexanders, Brad Izzard, Mark Geyer. Oh mate, what a side. Did you back yourselves to go 3 in a row though, or was it just a case of Penrith were just too bloody good on the day?
Oh, look, at half time, we were in front. We should have won that game.
Yeah.
And but we didn't, because it was we were up against a really red hot team, and we didn't control the game the way we should have.
Okay.
And I think we all look back and say, but in saying that, I certainly don't want to detract from a quality Penrith side that
Absolutely.
they were on fire, and so yeah, they'd worked so hard to win that grand final, and so full marks to them. But I do think that there was another one that sort of got away.
Bit of an opportunity missed there, you reckon?
Mm.
You did pick up the Clive Churchill again. Are you like you got your second one, and I think the third person in history to do it?
Oh, from a losing team.
Yeah, like to have two
Yes.
Clives and one from a losing side.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I was quite surprised when my name was read out, but from an individual perspective, I was deeply honoured. And then it's that bittersweet where, from a team's perspective, that we lost.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any dishonour in coming second in the
No,
toughest competition in the world. You know,
100%.
yeah, I look back and go, I understand the disappointment, but I think there's a sense of achievement of coming second in a competition like that, and so yeah, there's certainly reason to be disappointed and sad, but I always thought I look at that 91 grand final, I go, well, I'm really proud about coming second.
Yep.
I don't. I digest it. I don't necessarily need to love it and like it,
Yeah.
but I digest it and understand it.
Well, how amazing was it though when you look at it? 88, you make the finals. 89, you win the grand final. 90, the Raiders win the grand final, but you weren't in it. 91, you play another grand final, come second. Not a bad start to the old career, you know.
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't know football games other than playing finals football.
Exactly. You know, you're
Yeah.
like a Warriors fan or a player, mate.
And then
We
I
don't
think,
know.
yeah. Well, and then comes 92.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we did miss out on.
Yeah,
We had salary cap issues, and we had to release players at the Raiders, and
right.
consequently, I think Lazo had to get moved on, and
That's right.
a number of other players. So yeah, that meant that we weren't as successful in '92, which didn't sit well with us.
I bet it didn't. I've got one quick question though about the 91 final. So even though you guys lost, but do you ever look over at someone like Royce Simmons, who's just scored 2 tries in his last game, wins the Panthers' first ever premiership? Do you have a little bit of happiness for them, or is it just all doom and gloom from the Raiders' perspective?
No. I look at it from the big picture perspective and go, Royce. It was a fairy tale for Royce with
Amazing,
his
isn't it?
exit from the game. He deserved every piece of it.
Yeah,
No, I think the fact that it was their first grand final, good on them.
yeah,
And a really good bunch of blokes as well. They were trying to do the same thing as us, and the other sort of 14, 15 teams and they were successful, and the rest of us weren't.
yeah.
Mm.
There's a great little pocket of history actually how the Panthers just sort of popped up, with all these great young players that started coming through, like your Mark Guys and Brad Fittlers, and it just changed the face of the Penrith Panthers. And Greg Alexander was an absolute genius and
Yeah,
legend of a player, unreal. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There was they always had a good forward pack as well. You mentioned Guy, Johnny Cartwright,
Oh, Cartwright, yeah,
Vandervoort, Peter Kelly. Um, Paul Dunn was there for a while.
yeah.
They always had a ferocious pack.
Yeah, man. And so that led you on to playing some test footy. So we want to go back a little bit. Definitely have to talk about your test career. You made your debut for Australia, actually over here in New Zealand, I believe, against
Mm.
the Kiwis in Christchurch, winning the series 3-0. Is that, if I'm right?
Yeah. So that was my first tour for Australia over in NZ,
Yes.
and we were there for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and loved it. It was. I got to play with Wally Lewis.
How good is that?
I was on the same team as Wally Lewis. I
Hold your
was.
autograph well.
That's exactly right. A big blocker and Dale Shearer and these guys that you just finished playing a State of Origin series against some of these guys that
Yeah.
suddenly you're playing alongside them. So
Crazy.
yeah, it was a wonderful team.
Yeah, man. And you come up against some pretty handy Kiwis. No Sam Stewart's playing against you, Brendan Tudor, Hugh McGann, Clayton Friend, and you're down here in freezing cold Christchurch. What's the mindset for the Australians coming into a test match against the Kiwis down here?
Um, well, we sort of knew that we were up against. It was just going to be a tough every time the black and whites pull on their jersey. You're playing for keeps, and it was always going to be a tough day at the office. Brendan Tudor made things even tougher.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
love Brendan down here. We love Toots.
that 3-test series, he certainly made a name for himself and made sure that we all knew that he was out there. But look, they had a fantastic side. We won 3-0, but it was every game went down to the wire, you know. So
Yeah.
it was and it gave me a bit of a glimpse for the first time to have a look at all of New Zealand, and got to see Rotorua and
Yeah.
a lot of the rugby league areas of New Zealand. So yeah, it was good to see.
Yeah, man. And so you moved on to, let's move on to 1991. You're on the receiving end of a loss from the Kiwis, which didn't happen that often back then. In the first test at Olympic Park, you went down and,
Yes.
that was the match Dean Lonergan went down early, got up, carried on playing. What a legend, but like crazy, crazy stuff back then. What was it like, coming up against like a different type of, a few Kiwis that had made their debut, like Mosi Kaloto, like he was a great man. I've had him on the podcast, and you had guys like Tawit and Nico and Brent Todd, your Raiders teammate. What's it like coming up against these blokes?
Yeah, they all meant business when you played it. And look, to be fair, I any of those bigger blokes that and they were all massive. I found a sidestep for. I never. I always had a theory. I'm not going to run at these big blokes, so I'm just going to try and step around them. It just
Yep,
made sense to me.
yep,
Yes, and so I sometimes depends who was in front of you. I would be trying to run a little bit wider or use a bit of footwork before the line,
yep.
or else you're going to feel a crunch.
Yeah, man. I wouldn't want to run at Mosi Kaloto. He is an absolute enormous human.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Those big guys certainly try and find some sort of sidestep or skill um, to mitigate that risk.
Yep. That's good. Yeah, so was it pretty tough though, like actually going down to the Kiwis? Because I don't think there'd been many losses for quite a long time. What
Yeah,
was the general chit chat after the game? Or, 'cause I think the Broom might have got put through the team actually for the Kangaroos.
yeah. So we always had a tough game, and it was no surprise that we'd lose to the Kiwis. And you have a look at some of those players that were in their team, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Um, it I guess it come down to we may have. I do look at that level of state of origin football and
Yeah.
playing that level does elevate and prepare you to understand what the best football is all about.
Right.
And so I guess when you take that mentality into international football, sometimes that can be the difference.
Okay.
If you know what this is what good looks like, I'm going to prepare my body and prepare myself to go to war for
Yeah.
80 minutes, and it's on. And you where sometimes if you haven't been that battle ready,
Yeah.
um, you you may get tired after 70 minutes, or you
Okay.
may get tired after the back end of each half, the last 5 or 10 minutes. That's when you drop off a tackle.
Right.
That's when you drop the ball, or so through fatigue,
Yeah.
in particular fatigue. But if you don't know what to do in those special
Okay.
times, sometimes there's about 4 or 5 times in a game that you got to know what to do to win the game, or else those opportunities don't come in
Okay.
those tight games.
Right.
And you've really got to understand to know what to do to be able to secure a win during those times. You've got to have a good field position. Two, you've got to have your playmakers, your spine
Yeah.
with the ball in their hands. And two, you've got to know your role. I was a runner of the ball, but I need to understand what my role was in that last 7 minutes of each half.
Right.
That's a lot of points are scored during that time.
Very true, especially if you're a betting man and you don't want the score to change. You know.
Yes, that's right.
Very
Yes.
frustrating. Wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Right. So you did end up smashing the Kiwis in the next two games. It was a bit of a flogging, actually. So you won the series. And then we move on to 92, and you went to the World Cup final against Great Britain. An absolute cliffhanger. I think you got injured in that game. Is that right? Did
I
you
think
dig
I
your
hurt my
shoulder or something?
shoulder.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. I don't think I had an overly successful time at Wembley.
Yeah.
So Wembley. Yeah, I got injured in '94 as well. Sean Edwards took my head off.
Yeah.
Mm.
Crazy, crazy. So that you guys got the win 10-6. I had John Devereaux on the show a while ago, and he was absolutely devastated that they lost and it came so close. And I think he missed the tackle on Steve Renouf, who made a break and scored a try.
Oh, okay.
So he was
And
heartbroken. Yeah.
you can hardly blame me for that.
No.
The pearl would have ran around anyone in that game. It
Yeah.
was an out ball from Kevin Walters. No one would have stopped the pearl.
Yeah, he's too good.
If you're marking up one-on-one or even in a slide defence, no one would have got the pearl at that point. Yes, yeah. He was in full flight, already going outwards. He can hold his head high.
I bet, I bet. Did you mark up on Renouf's side in Origin at all? Did you have to try stop him, like, out wide?
Yeah, at different times. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Must
right.
have been a handful.
And so we're the same age, and I remember playing against the Pearl in the under-16s at the SCG one day. Him and Andrew G.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and been playing against and with each other for a long time.
Yeah, oh, they're
Yes.
fantastic guys, aren't they? So what is it like? Like that World Cup final, is that like the sublime moment, like winning a World Cup for your country? Like, is that rank up there with some of the greatest moments for you?
Yeah, it is. The World Cup was a little bit different back then. It was the sort of culmination of the last test over
Yeah,
a number of years that
yes, it was very strange.
contributed to the points. And but yeah, I was along with most people that play the game, particularly at that level. I just didn't want to lose anything.
Yeah,
And really proud. I'm very patriotic, and I sort of, throw me a green and gold jersey. I'm the proudest man in the world,
yeah,
because you grow up with those moments of the Olympics and Australia too, and it was Australian sport. It was a massive part of our culture, and as it is with New Zealand, it's just as proud, and it's so I to play for Australia and just give absolutely everything meant the world to me.
absolutely. Now, because we don't have state of origin in New Zealand, obviously, as an Australian and Origin player, like, and you can be you don't have to be diplomatic. Like, where's Test footy and Origin on? Are they on par with each other, or is one above the other? Like, because I think the Kiwi perspective is Aussies love Origin more than Test matches, and there's not enough Test matches, if you ask me. But what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think there's room for a try series. I think
Okay.
the Super League had it right.
Yeah.
I thought the Super League try series was a really good concept.
Okay.
I think, and yeah, I'd be still willing to try that. In terms of international football, that's tribalism at its absolute peak, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
100%.
representative of what you stand for, what your parents stand for, and
Yeah.
their parents, and
Yeah.
the people that you're representing, and I think there's that there always needs to be that platform,
Yes.
and the more of it, the better. I agree. How that fits into the NRL, competition schedule is sometimes a challenge.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I went to the World Cup match in 2017 in Hamilton in the North Island where Tonga beat New Zealand for the
Oh
first
yes,
time. I have never seen so many Tongans like so happy. The patriotism, it was mental. It was on another scale. Like
yeah.
it was amazing to be on the losing side, to be honest, because the atmosphere was unbelievable. It was crazy.
That's right. And suddenly there's boys and girls playing rugby league, more boys and girls in Tonga
Yeah.
than ever before because of that success. And it, yeah, I think there's plenty of room for that.
Yeah.
So how that those games get scheduled, I don't know, but it's yeah, having them mid-season, midweek even is sometimes is hard to do.
Yeah, man. I just hope they do start bringing more test matches in. Like I used to love the Anzac test and the rep round with Tonga, Samoa, like Fiji,
Yeah,
Papua New Guinea. Like, why is there not that there? It's so amazing to watch.
yeah,
Fantastic to
yeah.
watch.
Yeah, Australia v New Zealand on Anzac Day was fantastic.
So
You
good.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, it was wonderful.
Uh,
Yeah,
Bring it back. Bring it back. Right. So let's talk about the 1994 success. The Canberra Raiders, you finished third on the ladder. You're heading into the finals. You got through North Sydney okay in the first round, but then you went down an absolute beautiful match. It was like, as an unbiased supporter of this one, it was just a great spectacle. 1918, thanks to Daryl Halligan's field goal right at the end. And I think, didn't Kraken and Jason Williams score for the Doggies? It was a Kiwi onslaughts. Fantastic
yeah,
stuff. So, what's your mindset after losing that match to get through to the grand final?
yeah. I think that we were surprised by how good the Bulldogs were playing,
Okay,
and uh, it was it was a good thing for us in hindsight,
right.
but it meant that obviously had to go and play North the
Yeah,
following week. I think it
you
was,
did.
wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we always knew that was going to be tough, but we so it probably provided a little bit more motivation for us
Okay.
to succeed. It clipped our wings.
Yeah,
Although we'd come third, there was two teams in front of us, but we. I look back in hindsight and think that that was a good thing.
yeah. It definitely
Mm,
probably gave you that little kick up the arse that you need. Right, boys, this
exactly.
is it. Last chance.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly right. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you got through North Sydney again. It was interesting. You played North Sydney twice and the Bulldogs twice during that final series. That's really interesting in itself. So you got to the
Yeah.
grand final, and basically it was just a green machine onslaught. You guys were unbelievable. So tell us about the grand final. How amazing was it? All of that stuff.
Well, in '94, we played without Johnny Lomax.
Yeah, you
So
did.
Quentin Pongia and Johnny Lomax had come to us the year before after Lazo and Toddy got moved on
Yes.
because of the salary cap. Um, anyway, these guys made a mark the moment they stepped into our club,
Yeah.
and consequently, because you can't win grand finals without good front rowers,
Yeah.
these guys got us to the grand final. You know, they were fantastic.
That was.
Anyway, Johnny gets sent off
Yeah.
the week before against North, and him and Gary Larson
That's
got
right.
sent off in the
Yeah.
one game. So we, what are we going to do? So we go into the game with Paul Osborne as the replacement for Johnny Lomax. Fair player when he was back in St. George. Hadn't played much first grade that year with us at the
You
Raiders,
started, mate.
but Tim Sheens thought he could do the job.
Yeah.
It was a big risk because
Yeah.
some of the more senior players didn't think he could.
Okay.
Anyway, the rest is history. Martin Bella knocks the ball on in the first moment.
Yeah.
We capitalise on that through a Paul Osborne fantastic pass.
Yeah.
Paul lights up the stadium in the first 10 minutes. You know, and we'd secured the game by half time.
Yeah.
It was so it was a real luxury to play in a grand final that you'd sort of secured before half time. It was one of those rare games
Yeah.
that. But the risk was rewarded with Paul Osborne and Tim Sheens pulled the right rein. He
Master
saw
stroke.
something that the rest of us didn't.
Yeah. Mate, there's one moment in that match I think everyone will agree. The side of Melbourne plucking the ball out of the air, taking the intercept, running away with it. Jared McCracken hopelessly chasing in vain. Big Mel scores in his final game, goes out a winner. Like, does it get any better than that?
Well, it's that fairy tale finish, isn't it? We're
Great.
talking about Royce Simmons
Yeah.
in '91. Before that, I remember being down at the gates and catching a glimpse of Mick Cronin and Ray Price on their last game in '86.
Amazing.
It was those magical fairy tale moments,
Yeah.
Big Mal running and scoring a try. You just go, well, that's justified.
That's what you're saying earlier, like some things are just meant to be like,
That's right.
that was
Yes.
so good,
Yeah. Yeah.
One I still remember too is Stephen Menzies when he scores in the 2008 grand final, coming off the bench, they went 40-0. Like, how
Yeah.
deserving was he? He was an amazing player.
He sat. Put one boot in on the field,
Yeah,
and ran the ball 50 meters and scored.
it was
Yeah,
so good. Love
fantastic.
it. It's
Yeah.
great stuff. Oh, and while we're talking about Quinton Ponga, what are your memories of the late Quinton Ponga? We all loved him.
Mm.
He was from the West Coast, but played a lot of his junior footy here in Christchurch. And what are your memories of Quinton?
His physical stature wasn't that big,
Okay.
but no one ran at him.
No.
Because he was so tough.
Yeah.
He was his tackling technique, his strength, but you only can be effective with a really positive mindset, and so Quentin had all that
Yeah.
and really sort of stood up. He stood up in that '94 period where there was a lot of expectations around our club that we had to be successful, and Q and also Johnny Lomax were a major part of what we were all about, because your front rowers need to own the wins, the victories, and if they're not going forward, nothing else is.
Yeah.
There's
That's
no
right.
progress. Yes, and sometimes it can be a tough job. So they got to roll the sleeves up every game and get in the trenches and do the hard work, or else nothing is gained. Anyway, they did it really well. I look at Quentin and thank him for his efforts, because it made the rest of us look good.
Fair enough.
And a lovely bloke as well. Fitted in. Him and Johnny fitted in so well to our club culture. What we were all trying to do is win games, and they bought into it, and they didn't miss a beat. It was the training sessions are all tough.
Yeah.
And they may have been playing park footy one year, but they were playing with the Canberra Raiders at the top level the next year, and didn't miss a beat. They committed themselves and gave it a good crack.
It's beautiful, mate. Beautiful.
Mm.
Great memories of Quinton and Johnny Lomax. We all love Johnny Lomax over here. Great
Yeah.
1 million Marta boy. Yeah. Yeah. So fast forward a little bit. The news breaks in '98. You're signing with the Bulldogs for '99. So how did all that come about? Bit of a shock to probably most people when that news came out. 10 years or so with the Raiders. How that all come
I
about
played
from the Bulldogs.
11 seasons there, and I was a local. Always wanted to be a one club player, but the salary cap sort of was the official line that forced me out.
Right.
Yeah, whenever they say that, there's always something else. Um, but that was, like I said, it was sometimes rugby league is there to challenge us,
Okay.
and sometimes life challenges us. So you've got to lean into these times and understand them and try and make them work in your favour. And
Yeah.
I got to the Bulldogs um, and learned a whole new culture. Myself and
Yes.
Ricky Stewart, and look, we're having a look back. I still call Sydney home, and it's treated me well.
Okay. Was it strange though coming up against the Raiders for the first time, or training with a new bunch of blokes for the first time in 11 seasons?
All of that, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
You know, really, the culture at the Bulldogs was really working for each other and get in the trenches every training session and work hard, because they probably didn't have the same talent as on the park as the luxury of what Stuart Daly, Meningo,
Mullins.
Mullins,
Oh God.
and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
Throw Ruben Wiki into that mix.
Oh wow. Yes.
Um, so the Bulldogs at the time won football games because they were so close. They were so we've done the work
Okay.
at training. We know we've done the work, so there's no reason why the results shouldn't follow. And that's I sort of bought into it and sort of got to understand that that's the reason for their success.
Yeah. You had a couple of handy front rowers in Darren Britt and Steve Price, I believe, back then as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Pricey was when I first got there. Pricey was still relatively young,
Yeah.
and but yeah, they were superb. Um, Chooky, Daryl Halligan.
Yeah.
We used to call him Milo. He wasn't quick.
No, he was there for his goal kicking ability. Uh,
But the amount of times that he would find the try line
yeah,
was insane.
I know. He
It's
actually
just
scored a
he
lot.
just had a knack of finding the try line because he was really intelligent footy player,
Yeah,
even though he played on the wing.
yeah,
Yeah, he was a dead set footy player, but on the wing.
yeah.
Mm,
Oh, mate, we all loved him, especially us Kiwis. Scored a lot of tries for the Kiwis, kicked a lot
it
of
sure did.
very handy goals.
Yeah.
So, 99, you also recalled to State of Origin after not playing for 5 years. And I read there was a bit of a horse accident or something that happened that actually prevented you from playing. I actually didn't know about that. So,
Yeah,
what happened there?
it was one of those. I guess I say it was one of those things, but it was a mishap and the game was under a lot of scrutiny at the time for having probably too much alcohol within the professional sporting environment, and
Okay.
so instead of when the state of origin teams getting announced and catching up, the boys catching up on night one and having a few beers.
Yeah.
Um, there was no alcohol. We went horse riding the following
Okay.
day,
Right.
and so the horse riding, it was from lunch, and I was the last one out from lunch because I think I was I was the hungriest. And anyway, so consequently, I was on the oldest nag that was
Right.
left behind because everyone else jumped on a reasonable horse. So I jumped on this horse, and it hated me from the time I jumped on it, and things didn't get any better from there. So anyway, some of the boys took off on a bit of a canter, and my horse decided to wanted to do that as well. I was happy just to walk, but
Yeah.
immediately I'd lost a stirrup. I was getting dragged alongside. I'd already hit the deck. I was getting dragged along, and my foot got caught in the stirrup. And so, yeah, that was a bit of a tragedy. I'd smashed my shoulder and didn't play for 8 weeks.
Oh, mate, that's absolutely gut-wrenching after finally getting recalled. Was there any reason why you didn't play Origin and Test footy like sort of 94 onwards? Like Was it just being overlooked, or like, surely?
No, it was well, they didn't pick us in '95
Oh, that would have been the Super League stuff.
and '96 because
Yeah.
we'd signed with Super League.
Yes, that makes.
Um, then I was injured '96, I think. Yeah, but yeah, and then played in '97 with the Super League
Yes.
Australian team, and but yeah, I was disappointed because New South Wales won all three of those games, and it with the state of origin, and I could have been a part of that,
Yes.
And continued to play representative football because yeah, I felt as though I'd done the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
And so, getting towards the end of your Bulldogs career, you head off to the UK and you had a season over there with Leeds. So, how did the Leeds deal come up, and why Leeds? What made you want to go over there?
I think I wanted to experience everything that the game had and
Okay.
had to offer. So for me, I wanted the experience of playing in England, which was probably considered the next strongest competition,
Yep.
um, and take my family abroad and live abroad and
Okay.
have that whole experience of living in the UK. So that was the attraction, pretty much.
Okay.
It was a dream that I'd always had. It was something that I wanted to fulfill and did that. I signed a 2-year contract. I only played one.
Okay.
Um, I hurt my Achilles in the end, which is sort of an old man's injury.
Right.
Things tighten up as you get older,
Yep.
and your calves and your Achilles are the first ones to lose that suppleness.
Right.
And my wife had meningitis at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it was time to come home
Okay.
and start the next chapter, which is sort of I realised at a point in time I went I'm just not bending the line the way I wanted to.
Right.
The body wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, and so it was time to finish.
Okay. So, but while you were there, you were linked up with your mate Brett Mullins, I believe, and
Yes,
he was playing on the side. And I think your first three out of your first four matches were Challenge Cup games, and you went to a semi-final like within your first four games of playing in Super League.
yes,
What's that like, man? It's like massive crowd. That must have been unbelievable.
it was pretty cool, and we got caught up in all that. We were had some real success, um, and loved it. So Tony Carroll,
Oh, yes, he did.
he
Yeah.
was in the team as well.
Yep.
He was out in the centres. It was the Robbie Mears was in the
Oh,
team
really?
from the West Tigers. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
in our side. So it was a fair. We had a really quite a good side, and uh, but always struggled to to actually win the competition. Leeds has always come that third or fourth,
Yeah.
and until soon after, where there was certainly after my tenure, there was some other players come through, Kevin Sinfield and Robbie Burrows, the late Robbie Burrows just
Yes.
moved passed on. Um, yeah, those guys come in and gave good service.
They did, and they had Ali Lauatiti come over from the
That's
Warriors,
right.
and he was
Yes.
unbelievable, and every Warriors fan is filthy about it.
Yes. Yeah, he was playing really well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, you get to the end of your career. Do you ever look back and did you think you left any stones unturned, or you're quite satisfied with your lot in life with rugby league?
It's a good question. No, I'm really satisfied. I do wish that I didn't get injured. I wish this and I wish that.
Yeah.
But when I look back and go, am I satisfied? I go, I'm very content.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think the human body is actually meant to get bashed up
No.
week in and week out, let alone train in preparation every week for it. But at the same time, I'm the biggest thing I took out of the game is the people that I got to meet, and you know, now I call friends the Mal Meninga, Laurie Daly, Ricky Stewart. You know, they're all on speed dial. They're my
Cool.
good friends. You know, Steve Walters, and the list goes on and on. They're all just a phone call away, and then the people that are connected to the game. I would never have got to meet these people if it wasn't for the game.
Well, you and me both, mate. I just got back from Gold Coast and I got a call from Kurt Sorensen. Hey, come meet for coffee, after doing a podcast with him, and Sam Stewart and Gary Freeman shows up, and I was like, oh my God, I'm just like pinching myself. And I'm like, who
Absolute
gets to have
gold.
coffee with those guys? Like,
Yeah, and this is what sport does. You know, sport it crosses all boundaries. As we've seen, it's been used politically, but for friendships, it's absolute gold.
yeah. And I also got to catch up with David Lydiard, an absolute champion bloke, an
Yes.
absolute winner of a bloke. He's so cool. He's just super
Yeah.
nice guy, just
Yeah.
love it.
He
Yeah.
could play.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. Yeah, man, it was so cool. So yeah, I'm real grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's an absolute dream come true to talk to you guys. And yeah, man, I just wanted to thank you for your time.
And the ex players do like talking about their old times, and it gives us a platform to do that. So thank you, Dave. It's good to share.
Oh, mate, it's my pleasure. And thank you to everyone for listening out there on Spotify, watching on YouTube. Get on the Facebook group, Point of Difference Rugby League. Heaps of old legends hanging about in there, posting all their old stuff, nostalgic memories. It's all fantastic. And I've been your host, Dave, and we'll see you all next time for kickoff.
Full time.